My mother didn't even look up when they called my name. The auditorium lights were bright enough to blur faces, but I still saw her clearly. Second row, arms crossed, scrolling her phone. I stood there in my graduation gown, diploma folder in my hands, waiting for something, a smile, a nod, anything. Nothing came. Behind me, another student whispered, "Your family here." I nodded automatically. Technically, yes. Emotionally, I wasn't sure anymore. My father leaned toward my mother and said something. She laughed quietly. Not proud laughter, not emotional laughter. The kind people use when they're embarrassed to be associated with someone. I stepped off the stage as applause faded. Families stood, cheering, waving flowers, shouting names. Mine stayed seated. When I reached them, my mother finally looked up. "Well," she said, shrugging, "you finished." That was it, no hug. No congratulations, just acknowledgement. My younger brother Jason didn't even hide his grin. 4 years for that degree, he muttered. Could have just learned it on YouTube. My father sighed heavily. "We're happy you're done experimenting," he said. "Now maybe you'll do something practical." Something inside me went very still, because they weren't joking. To them, my graduation wasn't an achievement. It was proof I'd wasted time. I smiled anyway. I always smiled. Because arguing never changed anything in our house. And because I already knew something they didn't. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. I ignored it. The ceremony continued, speeches echoing around us. Then it rang again, and again, 3 times. I stepped aside near the exit doors and answered quietly. "Hello," a calm professional voice replied. "Hi, is this Lena Carter?" "Yes. This is Daniel Reeves from Aurelius Systems. We've been trying to reach you regarding your research submission." I froze, because Aurelius Systems wasn't just a company, it was the company. A global tech giant valued at nearly $20 billion. And they were calling me. I didn't answer immediately. My brain lagged behind reality. "Sorry," I said carefully. "You might have the wrong person." A soft chuckle came through the phone. "No, Miss Carter, we reviewed your AI behavioral modeling project last month." My stomach dropped. That project. The one my parents called a hobby. The one my professor said was ambitious but risky. The one I almost didn't submit because my father told me real companies only hired serious majors. Daniel continued. "Our executive team would like to invite you to visit our headquarters." I glanced back toward my parents. My mother was already gathering her purse, ready to leave, as if nothing important had happened today. "As in an interview?" I asked. A pause, then, "Not exactly. We'd prefer to discuss a position offer." Offer. The word echoed strangely. Because 10 minutes earlier, my family had treated my degree like a mistake. And now a multi-billion-dollar company was asking me to fly across the country. Something felt unreal, almost wrong. Why me? How did they even find my work? And why now, on the exact day my parents decided my future didn't matter? I said yes before fear could interrupt. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not from excitement, from confusion. Because suddenly 2 completely different versions of my life existed at the same time. One where I was the family disappointment, and one where someone powerful saw something valuable in me. Only one of those versions knew the truth. Before I continue, I'm curious. Where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it? And if stories about quiet justice and real emotional turning points resonate with you, like this video and consider subscribing. Now, let go back to that moment, when I had no idea how uncomfortable things were about to become. My name is Lena Carter. I was 24 years old that day, and my family had already decided who I was long before graduation arrived. I grew up in a practical household. My father ran a small accounting firm. Structure mattered to him. Predictability mattered. Success meant stability, steady income, respectable titles. My older cousins became doctors. My brother Jason studied business management and was already working with my dad. Everyone followed clear paths, except me. I studied computational psychology and artificial intelligence, which, according to my parents, translated to computer stuff nobody hires for. Dinner conversations always followed the same rhythm. "So," my mother would say, placing plates down, "have you figured out what job this degree actually leads to?" Jason would laugh. Influencer analytics, maybe. My father rarely mocked me directly. He dismissed me instead. Silence. Topic changes, subtle disappointment. And oddly, that hurt more. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't reckless. I worked constantly. Late nights in campus labs, research assistant positions nobody else wanted, data cleaning jobs professors assigned when deadlines approached. But none of it looked impressive from the outside. No internships at recognizable companies, no flashy achievements, just quiet work, and a single project that became everything. My senior research focused on predicting emotional behavior patterns using adaptive AI models. I wanted machines to recognize subtle emotional shifts humans ignore. Not marketing, not ads, human understanding. When I tried explaining it at dinner one night, my father interrupted. So, psychology pretending to be tech, Jason smirked. Sounds expensive and useless. I remember staring at my food, feeling heat rise in my face. Not anger, embarrassment. Like maybe they were right. Maybe I'd misunderstood reality. That doubt followed me everywhere. Even when my professor, Dr. Nguyen, stopped me after class. You realize this model could change human-AI interaction? I laughed nervously. My parents think it's pointless. She studied me carefully. Sometimes families measure safety, not potential. I didn't fully understand her words then. I do now. The night before graduation, we sat around the kitchen table. My mother folded napkins mechanically. So what's the plan after tomorrow? She asked. I'm applying to research labs, I said carefully. Jason leaned back. Translation unemployed. I'm working on it. Dad looked over his glasses. Lena, we're not criticizing you, we're concerned. About what? About reality, he said gently. Passion is nice, stability matters. I swallowed. I am being realistic. He shook his head. No company is waiting for theoretical students. Silence settled heavily. I remember thinking, maybe he's right. Maybe I've misunderstood how the world works. Maybe tomorrow is just an ending. I went to bed that night believing graduation marked failure disguised as achievement, which is why the phone call felt impossible. After the ceremony, we went to lunch. My parents insisted on a casual diner near campus. No celebration dinner. No need to make a big deal, my mother said. Graduations happen every year. I told myself not to care, but small things reveal big truths. They ordered quickly, talked about Jason's promotion, discussed my cousin's engagement. My graduation barely entered conversation. Halfway through lunch, my phone buzzed again. Email notification. Subject line. Aurelius Systems executive invitation. My heart pounded. I opened it quietly under the table. Flight details, hotel booking, meeting with senior leadership. This wasn't spam. This was real. I looked up. Should I tell them? Part of me wanted validation, just once. I got an interesting email, I said carefully. My father nodded absent-mindedly. A company wants me to visit their headquarters. Jason snorted. Probably recruitment spam. It's Aurelius Systems. My mother blinked. Never heard of it. Jason shrugged. Sounds fake. Dad didn't even ask questions. He just said, be careful. Scams target graduates. Something shifted inside me then. Not anger, clarity, because they weren't evaluating information. They had already decided the outcome. Anything positive about me had to be unrealistic. And for the first time, I didn't argue. I just said, okay, and let them believe it. That evening, the company sent another email confirming travel arrangements. Business class ticket, corporate car pickup, formal itinerary. I reread it at least 20 times. Excitement mixed with fear. What if I wasn't good enough? What if they made a mistake? I almost canceled. Then Dr. Nguyen called. I heard from Aurelius, she said warmly. You knew. I recommended your research. My breath caught. You did. Lena, she said gently. People in industry noticed your work months ago. Months. While I sat at family dinners feeling invisible. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Because confidence has to grow internally, she replied. External validation comes later. I sat in silence after hanging up, realizing something unsettling. The world outside my home had been responding to me completely differently. Two realities, one shrinking me, one expanding me, and I had been believing the smaller one. 2 days later, I packed my suitcase in my childhood bedroom. My mother stood in the doorway. "So you're actually going?" she asked. "Yes," she folded her arms. "Just don't get your hopes up." "I'm not. You tend to imagine things bigger than they are." I paused. For once, I answered honestly. "Maybe," she softened slightly. "We just don't want you disappointed." I nodded. But inside I thought I already learned how to survive disappointment. From here, Jason walked past. "Bring back free merch," he joked. I smiled faintly. They still didn't believe anything meaningful was happening, and strangely, that gave me freedom. No expectations meant no pressure, or so I thought, because the real shift hadn't happened yet. The real story didn't start at graduation. It started the moment I stepped into Aurelius Systems headquarters and realized they hadn't invited me as a candidate. They were treating me like someone they had been waiting for. And that changed everything. I walked into the glass lobby expecting an interview. Instead, the receptionist stood up immediately. "Miss Carter," she said, smiling, "they've been anticipating your arrival all morning." Anticipating. Not evaluating. Not interviewing. Waiting. That was the moment I understood. My family didn't know who I was, but this company somehow did. And what they were about to tell me would completely reframe every conversation I'd ever had at home. The lobby didn't feel like a workplace. It felt like an airport for ideas. Glass walls rose 3 stories high, sunlight reflecting off polished floors. Digital displays rotated through projects, medical AI, climate simulations, behavioral analytics platforms used by governments and global companies. People moved quickly but calmly. Nobody looked stressed. Nobody looked small, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I might belong somewhere. The receptionist handed me a badge. She smiled warmly. "Dr. Alvarez will be right down. Would you like coffee?" I almost corrected her. Visitor felt too official. Dr. Alvarez sounded too important. "Yes, thank you," I said quietly. As I waited, I noticed something strange. Several employees walking past glanced at my badge, then at me, not curious. Recognizing, one woman paused briefly. "You're Lena?" she asked. I nodded, unsure. Her face lit up. "I read your adaptive empathy paper. That was brilliant." She walked away before I could respond. I sat frozen, because at home, my work barely counted as conversation. Here, strangers knew it by name. How many versions of myself existed? The disappointment at home, or the researcher these people respected. The elevator doors opened. A tall man in his 50s stepped out, smiling like we already knew each other. "Lena Carter," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome to Aurelius." Dr. Miguel Alvarez, Chief Research Director. I recognized him instantly from academic articles. My pulse jumped. "Thank you for inviting me," I managed. He laughed gently. "Inviting you. We were worried another company would get to you first." I blinked. "I thought this was an interview." He shook his head as we walked toward the elevator. "No, interviews are for people we're unsure about." The elevator doors closed, and my entire understanding of the situation shifted. The elevator ride felt surreal. Glass walls revealed entire research floors below, teams collaborating, prototypes running simulations, screens filled with live data. Dr. Alvarez spoke casually. "When did you realize your model could predict emotional hesitation patterns?" I hesitated. "I didn't think anyone noticed that part." He smiled knowingly. "That's the part that caught our attention." My mind raced. Who else reviewed my work? How long had they been watching? We entered a conference room overlooking the city skyline. 3 executives stood as I walked in. They greeted me warmly, like a colleague returning from vacation. Not a student visiting headquarters for the first time. One of them, a woman named Claire Bennett, slid a tablet toward me. On the screen, my research. Highlighted. Annotated, months of analysis. "We've been evaluating this for 6 months," she said. 6 months. While I sat at dinner tables defending my major. While my parents worried I'd never find work. While I doubted myself. Someone else had already decided I mattered. Claire leaned forward. "Your model doesn't just recognize emotions," she said. "It anticipates emotional decision delays." I nodded slowly. "Yes, that capability solves a major problem in AA-human interaction." Dr. Alvarez added gently. Most AI reacts. Yours understands hesitation before action. Another executive spoke. We believe your framework could become the foundation of our next generation behavioral systems. I stared at them, trying to process. So you want me to work on it here? Claire smiled. We want you to lead its development. The word lead echoed loudly. I just graduated, I said. Dr. Alvarez laughed softly. Experience matters. Insight matters more. Silence filled the room. My thoughts spiraled. My parents said companies weren't waiting for people like me, yet here I was being asked to guide a major research direction. Claire slid another document forward. An offer letter. Salary numbers I had never imagined seeing attached to my name. Equity options. Research autonomy. Relocation package. My hands trembled slightly. I don't understand, I admitted. Why me? Dr. Alvarez answered calmly. Because you solved a problem seasoned researchers didn't realize existed. All those nights alone in the lab, all the times I thought I was behind, all the moments I believed I was failing. They hadn't been wasted. They had been invisible preparation. And suddenly I understood something painful. My family never saw effort unless it looked familiar. After lunch, Dr. Alvarez gave me a tour. Labs buzzed quietly with innovation. People greeted him respectfully and greeted me too, not as a visitor, as someone already belonging. We stopped near a collaborative workspace. A researcher approached excitedly. You're Lena Carter, right? Yes, he laughed. We argued about your model for weeks. Argued? Half the team thought it was impossible. The other half thought it was genius. He grinned. Turns out the genius side won. I smiled awkwardly, but inside something cracked open. For years, I'd adapted myself to environments where I felt smaller. Now I stood somewhere that expanded me instead. That realization felt overwhelming. We paused near a window overlooking the campus. He spoke quietly. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why do you doubt yourself so much? The question hit harder than expected. I hesitated. My family thinks my field isn't practical. He nodded slowly. I've seen that pattern before. I looked at him. Pattern? People raised in environments that reward certainty often struggle with innovation. Innovation looks unstable. I swallowed. They think they're protecting me. Maybe they are, he said gently, but protection can accidentally become limitation. His words settled heavily, because deep down I knew they were true. By afternoon, HR joined us. Paperwork discussions began. Start dates. Research teams, housing arrangements, everything moved quickly. Too quickly. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Family group chat. Mom, when are you coming home? Dad, don't forget dinner tonight. Jason. Did the scam people ask for money yet? I stared at the messages. A strange emotional split formed. One world expanding rapidly. One refusing to change at all. I typed, still at the meeting. I'll explain later. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. No reply. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and signed the preliminary acceptance. The pen felt heavier than expected, not because of fear, because it marked the first decision I made completely independent of family approval. The realization didn't come during the meeting. It came in the hotel room that night. I sat by the window overlooking the city lights, replaying the day, every compliment, every conversation, every moment someone assumed I deserved to be there. And suddenly a painful clarity surfaced. My parents hadn't misunderstood me. They had never truly tried to understand me. They valued predictability. I represented uncertainty, so they minimized what they couldn't measure. It wasn't cruelty, it was limitation. But the emotional impact was the same. I whispered aloud. They never saw me. And saying it felt both heartbreaking and freeing. Because once you accept that someone cannot see you fully, you stop waiting for permission to become yourself. The next morning I called home. My mother answered. So, how was the interview? It wasn't an interview. Pause. What do you mean? They offered me a position. Silence stretched, then a small laugh. Sweetie, be realistic. It's real. My father's voice joined in the background. What company again? Aurelia Systems. Another pause. Jason said loudly. Google says it's huge. Are you sure you're not misunderstanding? I felt something shift inside me. old Lena would argue, defend, explain desperately. Instead, I stayed calm. "They're sending details. I'll show you when I get back." Mom sighed. "We just don't want you embarrassed." "I know," I said softly, and I meant it. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to convince them. I didn't need belief anymore, only time. Let them doubt. Truth doesn't rush, I decided then. I wouldn't announce anything dramatically. I would let reality reveal itself. Quietly, undeniably. When I arrived home 2 days later, nothing had changed. Same kitchen smells, same television noise, same emotional temperature. My suitcase sat by the door. Mom glanced up. "You're back early." "I finished meetings." Dad looked over paperwork. "So, what happened?" I handed him the offer letter. He skimmed it casually at first, then stopped. Read again. Adjusted his glasses. Jason leaned over his shoulder. "Wait, that salary can't be right." My mother took the paper. Her expression shifted slowly from skepticism to confusion, then discomfort. "Is this permanent?" she asked. "Yes." Silence filled the room. Not celebration, not excitement, adjustment, like reality had entered before they were emotionally prepared. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, if it's legitimate, that's good." Good, after years of doubt. Just good. I felt surprisingly calm. No anger, no triumph, just distance. Because something fundamental had already changed inside me. Their approval no longer determined my worth. That night at dinner, conversation felt different. Jason asked questions. "So what exactly will you do?" "Research development." Dad nodded slowly. "Sounds complicated." "It is." Mom studied me quietly. "You'll have to move." "Yes." Another silence. Then she said softly, "We didn't realize your work mattered that much." I looked at her and understood something important. They weren't villains. They were people encountering a version of me they had never imagined, and that realization unsettled them. Over the next week, subtle changes appeared. Relatives started calling. Word spread quickly. Suddenly, my achievements became conversation topics. My father mentioned me to clients. Jason asked for networking advice. My mother told neighbors proudly, "Our daughter works in AI research." The shift should have felt validating. Instead, it felt strange. Because the recognition arrived only after external success confirmed my value. And that planted a quiet question inside me. Would they have ever believed in me without proof? That question lingered, unanswered. And it set the stage for the real emotional confrontation still coming. Because success didn't erase old dynamics, it exposed them. 2 weeks before my move, my parents hosted a family dinner to celebrate. Relatives filled the house. Laughter echoed. Everyone congratulated me. But halfway through the evening, I overheard my father telling an uncle, "We always knew she'd figure something out eventually." I stood frozen in the hallway, because that wasn't true. And for the first time, I realized something deeper than doubt had existed all along. They weren't just unsure about me. They had rewritten history to protect themselves from admitting they were wrong. And that realization changed how I saw everything. I wasn't supposed to hear it. I had only stepped into the hallway to grab my phone charger. Voices carried from the living room where my father stood with my uncle and 2 cousins. Laughter, ice clinking in glasses, family celebration noise. And then my father said casually, "We always knew Lena would figure something out eventually." My uncle nodded. "You pushed her in the right direction." Dad chuckled modestly. "Well, kids need grounding. We never doubted her intelligence." Something inside me tightened, because I remembered every dinner conversation, every dismissal, every sigh, every be realistic. I stayed still behind the wall, listening. Cousin Rachel asked, "So you supported the tech thing from the beginning?" Dad answered without hesitation. "Of course, we just didn't want her getting unrealistic expectations." The words landed softly, almost harmless, but they rearranged reality. They erased years of doubt. They turned skepticism into guidance. And suddenly I understood something uncomfortable. My success wasn't just changing my future. It was rewriting my family's memory. Why does this bother me so much? Isn't this what I wanted, pride? Then why does it feel like I disappeared from my own story? Because they weren't celebrating me. They were protecting their image. I walked back into the room. Everyone turned toward me smiling. My mother clapped lightly. There she is, the star of the evening. Applause followed. Warm, loud, performative. I smiled politely, but something had shifted. I wasn't angry, I was observing. We gathered around the large dining table. Plates passed, voices overlapped. Questions came rapidly. Uncle Mark, so Lena, what exactly do you do again? Me, I work on behavioral AI systems. Cousin Rachel, like robots that read emotions. Me, something like that. Dad interrupting proudly. She's always been analytical, even as a kid. I looked at him. He avoided my eyes, even as a kid. You told me psychology was impractical 6 months ago. Jason, honestly, she surprised all of us. He laughed lightly. People chuckled. A harmless joke to everyone else. But I felt the layered meaning underneath. Surprised. As if success contradicted expectation. Mom, we just wanted her to be secure. Aunt Linda, that's good parenting. Mom nodded gratefully. I watched quietly, noticing patterns. Every statement repositioned them as supporters. Nobody mentioned doubt. Nobody mentioned discouragement. Reality softened, edited, reframed. Uncle Mark, didn't you worry about job prospects, though? Dad answered immediately. We trusted her judgment. That sentence almost made me laugh, because memory flashed. No company is waiting for theoretical students. I felt a strange calm rise inside me. Not confrontation, recognition. The emotional balance had changed. For years, I defended myself. Now, I didn't need to. Truth existed independently. I barely spoke during dinner. Instead, I watched, noticed how pride replaced skepticism once success became public knowledge. My mother brought out dessert, chocolate cake, candles. She smiled warmly. We're proud of you. I believed she meant it. But another realization formed. Pride arrived when risk disappeared, when success was proven safe. And suddenly I understood why the earlier doubt hurt so much. It wasn't disagreement. It was loneliness. Working toward something no one around you believes in changes how you trust people. Later, while washing dishes, Mom joined me. Water ran between us. She spoke softly. You seemed quiet tonight. I was listening. She nodded. You know we always wanted the best for you. I dried a plate slowly. I know, she hesitated. We just didn't understand your field. That's okay. She looked relieved, but I added gently. It felt like you didn't believe in me. Her hands stopped moving. Silence stretched. Mom, we were scared. Me of what? Mom, that you'd struggle. Me, I was already struggling. She looked at me carefully, as if seeing something new. I didn't realize that. And for the first time, the conversation felt honest. Later that night, Jason knocked on my bedroom door. He leaned casually against the frame. So, you're really moving? Yes, he nodded slowly. That's big. We sat in awkward silence. Then he said something unexpected. I used to think you were avoiding reality. I smiled faintly. You weren't alone, he laughed. Dad worries about control. When he doesn't understand something, he assumes it's risky. That explained more than years of arguments ever had. Jason continued. When your offer came, he spent hours researching your company. Really? Yeah. He didn't sleep that night. I blinked. That detail surprised me, because outwardly Dad acted calm, detached, but privately he had been trying to understand. Maybe doubt wasn't rejection, maybe it was fear expressed poorly. That realization softened something inside me 2 days later. Dad asked me to walk with him. We rarely walked together. Neighborhood streets felt unusually quiet. He cleared his throat several times before speaking. I owe you something, he said. I waited. He looked straight ahead. I didn't understand your path. I stayed silent. He continued. When I built my career, stability meant survival. I projected that onto you. I nodded slowly. That makes sense, he exhaled. But I realize now I may have discouraged you. The word may almost made me smile. Even apologies arrive cautiously in some families. Dad, did we make things harder for you? Me. Sometimes. Dad, why didn't you say anything? Me, I did, just quietly. He stopped walking, looked at me directly. I'm proud of you. The words landed differently this time. Not public pride, private recognition. I believed him. And that mattered more. The weeks before relocation passed quickly. Packing boxes, selling old furniture, canceling subscriptions. Each action felt symbolic. I wasn't escaping my family. I was stepping into a life they never imagined for me. Dinner conversations shifted tone. They asked about my work genuinely now. Mom researched my city. Dad discussed investment options. Jason joked about visiting my office someday. Healing wasn't dramatic, it was gradual adjustment. Our final dinner before my move felt calmer than any gathering before. Mom, are you nervous? Me, a little. Dad, that's normal before something meaningful. Jason raised his glass. To Lena, the smartest person we underestimated. Everyone laughed, even me, because this time the joke acknowledged truth. The party wasn't my idea. My mother organized it. A small farewell gathering, she said, which in my family language meant, everyone who ever doubted you will now come watch you leave. The backyard lights were already glowing when I stepped outside. String lights hung between trees, neighbors filled folding chairs, relatives clustered near the food table. Soft music played. Laughter drifted through warm evening air. It looked like celebration. But emotionally, it felt like a stage. And I knew exactly why. Because over the past 2 weeks, something had quietly bothered me. A pattern, a detail I couldn't ignore. Every time someone congratulated my parents, they told the story differently. Not maliciously, not loudly, but consistently. They were positioning themselves as the architects of my success. We pushed her toward practical thinking. We guided her decisions. We made sure she stayed grounded. Each sentence erased something invisible. The years I defended myself alone. The nights I questioned my worth. The quiet humiliation at my graduation dinner. And at first, I told myself it didn't matter. But then something happened 3 days earlier. Something small. Something revealing. I had stopped by Dad's office to drop off paperwork. He didn't know I arrived early. His door was slightly open. Inside, he spoke to a client, laughing, relaxed. And then I heard it. Well, kids don't always know what's best. Sometimes parents have to steer them. Pause. Yes, my daughter wanted to chase abstract research. I made sure she stayed realistic. She was being silly, that's all. I froze. Because that wasn't just memory rewriting anymore. That was ownership. Ownership of a journey he never supported. I didn't confront him then. I didn't interrupt. Instead, I recorded the moment. Not secretly planned revenge. Not anger. Just instinct. Something in me knew the truth would matter later. Guests gathered around as my father raised a glass. He loved speeches, loved storytelling, loved shaping narratives. Everyone, he said warmly, thank you for coming tonight. People quieted. My mother smiled proudly beside him. Dad continued. When Lena chose her field, we encouraged discipline, focus, stability. Polite laughter, nods. I felt the old familiar sensation, being spoken about instead of to. He continued confidently. She always had potential, we just helped guide her toward success. Applause followed, soft, supportive, expected. And in that moment, I realized something important. If I stayed silent, this version of history would become permanent. Not just for them. For me. This isn't about revenge. It's about accuracy. I stepped forward slowly. Can I say something? Dad smiled, surprised but pleased. Of course. Someone handed me the microphone. My hands didn't shake. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm. And calm truth is far more powerful than emotional reaction. I looked around, neighbors, relatives, friends, people who watched my journey from the outside. I want to thank everyone for being here, I began softly. And I want to tell a slightly different version of this story. Light laughter. Curiosity. Dad smiled politely, unaware. Me. When I graduated, my parents were worried about my future. Mom nodded cautiously. Yes, we were. I smiled gently. And that's normal. Parents worry. Agreement murmured through the crowd. Safe territory. Then I added, but I think something important gets lost when success arrives. Silence deepened. People leaned closer, me. When you succeed, people often rewrite the beginning so the ending feels comfortable. Dad shifted slightly. Confusion flickered across his face. Uncle Mark, what do you mean? I met his eyes calmly. I mean my parents didn't always believe this path would work. The air changed instantly. Not hostile, just honest. Mom looked nervous. Dad chuckled lightly. Well, every parent has doubts. I nodded. Yes, then I continued carefully. But doubt and discouragement aren't the same thing. The crowd grew quiet. You could hear ice melting in glasses. I pulled my phone from my pocket, not dramatically, almost casually. I actually struggled with whether to say this tonight, I admitted. I don't want to embarrass anyone. Dad relaxed slightly, relieved. He assumed I would soften the moment. Instead, I said, "But I think honesty matters more than comfort." And then I pressed play. My father's voice filled the backyard speakers. Clear, unmistakable. Kids don't always know what's best. Sometimes parents have to steer them. My daughter wanted to chase. The same conversation I overheard. Silence dropped like weight, real silence. The kind that absorbs sound. My father's smile vanished slowly. Mom covered her mouth. Guests looked between us, unsure where to focus. The recording ended. I lowered the phone. No anger, no accusation, just presence. Dad spoke first, quietly. "Lena," I met his gaze. "I'm not playing this to shame you." My voice stayed steady. "I'm playing it because success shouldn't erase truth." Nobody moved. Even the music seemed distant. Because appreciation in private and disrespect behind my back are two different things, Dad. I spoke with hurt. "Me, you were scared for me." Dad, "Yes, me, you doubted my choices." Long pause. "Yes, me, and that hurt." He swallowed. "I didn't realize how much." I nodded gently. "I know." Then I turned toward the guests. "And that's the real story." I continued speaking, not louder, not harsher, just clearer. I didn't succeed because someone guided me perfectly. I succeeded while learning to believe in myself without external certainty. People listened intensely now. Not to drama, to truth, me. My parents love me, but love sometimes comes with fear, and fear can sound like limitation. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad looked exposed, but not attacked, and that was the difference. This wasn't destruction. It was accountability. Then something I hadn't planned happened. Dad stepped forward. He took the microphone gently from my hand. The audience held its breath. He looked at me first, then at everyone else, and said, "She's right." Shock rippled through the group. He continued slowly. "I was afraid she would fail, and instead of admitting fear, I called it practicality." He exhaled deeply. "I didn't guide her success. She achieved it despite my doubts." The honesty stunned me, because real accountability is rarer than apology. He turned toward me. "I'm sorry for the moments I made you feel unseen." Emotion rose unexpectedly in my chest. Not victory, relief. I spoke quietly. "I never needed perfection, just honesty." He nodded. "And I'm learning." Mom joined us, wiping tears. "We're proud of you," she said. "This time for the right reasons." Soft laughter broke the tension. People relaxed. Conversations restarted, but something fundamental had changed. The power dynamic reset. Not humiliation, not dominance, not shouting. The revenge was. Truth spoken calmly, history, corrected publicly, emotional reality, acknowledged respect, restored without cruelty. The audience didn't see conflict. They witnessed growth. And that created deeper satisfaction than anger ever could. Standing there under the lights, I realized something profound. Revenge isn't always about hurting someone back. Sometimes it's about reclaiming authorship of your own story. Because once truth is spoken, no one can rewrite you again. After that evening, our dynamic changed permanently. My parents asked questions instead of giving instructions. Jason sought advice instead of teasing. Conversations became collaborative, not hierarchical. I wasn't the uncertain child anymore. I was an adult with her own direction. And strangely, the distance created healthier closeness. 6 months later, I stood in a glass conference room at Aurelius Systems presenting research updates. My team listened attentively. Colleagues debated ideas respectfully. After the meeting, Dr. Alvarez smiled. "You've settled in well." "I finally feel aligned," I admitted. That night, I video called my parents. Mom asked about my project. Dad wanted to understand the algorithm. Jason bragged about me to friends in the background. The conversation felt easy, natural, no defense required. Success didn't fix my family, understanding did. We learned each other slowly, imperfectly, but honestly. Looking back, the graduation wasn't the turning point. The phone call wasn't either. The real shift happened when I stopped waiting for others to recognize my worth before recognizing it myself. My parents didn't call my graduation pointless because they didn't love me. They called it pointless because they feared uncertainty. And sometimes love speaks through limitation until experience teaches otherwise. I learned something important. People can grow alongside your success if you allow space for learning. Peace didn't come from proving anyone wrong. It came from understanding that belief often arrives later than effort. And that's okay. I want to ask you something honestly. If you were in my place, would you have confronted your parents publicly? Or would you have done what I did, let time reveal the truth quietly? Who was really wrong here? The parents who doubted, or the daughter who needed to walk her path alone first? And if you liked the story, like and subscribe for more stories because stories like this remind us. Sometimes the biggest victories aren't loud. They're the moments when you finally become someone you no longer need permission to be.